Hi. So, as we all know, there are a bunch of companies manufacturing at either the true 164 scale models or diecast models roughly 3 inches long in order to fit their packaging. I started collecting with Hot Wheels, and I got some Matchboxes, and then Greenlight got me into this whole true 164 thing. Currently, I own models from 24 different brands. Well, 25 technically, but one of them is so niche it doesn't really count. Um, but this will be a series of videos in which I talk about all 24 of these brands. And this first video will serve as both an introduction, a table of contents of sorts, as well as a quick rundown of all 24 brands. Afterwards, there will be 3 more videos on 3 smaller categories, which goes much more into details on the brands as well as their specific lines. So part 2 will be focusing on basic toy models, and we'll start with Hot Wheels and go into brands such as Moraga and Tarmac. Part 3 is dedicated to premium models that are not true 164, which I personally refer to as the quote-unquote awkward zone of diecast, which mainly consists of premium models from Hot Wheels and Matchbox, but obviously there will be others. Part 3 will be true 164 scale premium models, which I personally consider the best that these companies could offer. Hopefully this makes sense and also makes it easier for you to choose what the categories based on your personal interest and obviously as well as your budget. As a general rule, part 2 will be the cheapest and part 4 the most expensive, although not always the case. And that's it for the introduction as well as the quote-unquote table of contents, and the quick overview of all 24 companies starts now. Alright, here we go. So first of all, obviously Hot Wheels, owned by Mattel, American company. Mainline models, which is their basic models, are very cheap, $1, so you can find them easily in the United States as well as all over the world. Huge selection of models from real cars, movie cars, as well as their own original designs. They have fairly okay detail, fairly good detail for what they're sold for. Pretty good quality control in terms of the actual materials and castings. Not so much in the prints, you see a lot of scratches. They also have a very new line, what's called Hot Wheels ID, which is pretty much a cool toy. It's got the full premium detailing, full deco, as well as what's called the Spectral Flame paint, which is the reflective metallic color you see that's completely messing up my cameras. Sweet, that's better. It has a chip on the underside that records playtime, top speed, etc. They're being sold for $7. And although the prices will drop to $5 later this year, they work with either the $30 Portal or the $100+ ID track, which means they're very, very expensive. I think it's cool for collectors, but not so cool as a toy, mostly because of its price. But for collectors, the most important stuff from Hot Wheels is their premium stuff. Now, there's generally 3 premium lines. That's the car culture, pop culture, as well as entertainment. Now there are other lines, but they can easily fit nicely under these 3 more primary branches. They have full deco metal body as well as a metal chassis as well as rubber tires, what Hot Wheels calls real riders. They have really, really good quality control. They're not true 164. This one happens to be, but most of them are not. Alright, now we go to the other Mattel branch, and that is, of course, Matchbox. Now, Matchbox is also $1, and these vehicles are either properly licensed models or realistic unlicensed models, which means, in my opinion, they are much better for collectors. And overall, especially their paint, have much better quality control than Hot Wheels. Matchbox also has what they call the basic plus of moving parts, which I don't have one, but it's exactly what you imagine it to be, just basic Matchbox with moving parts. They also do their premium line of what's called super fast, which is an interesting concept. They're upgraded versions of either basic models or moving parts models, and well, they still have a plastic base, but they do have rubber tires, and most of them I don't think these are really suitable for collectors. You see this one does have opening doors, but as a result, he also just looks a lot worse in my opinion. So not as desirable for collectors as, for instance, Hot Wheels premium models. Next up, another brand that's going to be pretty accessible in the United States will be Maisto. Now, Maisto is part of the Meichong Group, which is based in Hong Kong. They're very basic. They have very few details, usually no interiors. For instance, this Hummer you see in front of you. The wheels look really weird, look really thin, but in general, they do have very good printing techniques. Prints are very detailed, and their prints have pretty good quality control. Maisto also have their own premium models, which there's like 20 different names for these premium models. They have plastic base and rubber tires and much better details than their basic models. And similar to their basic models, again, great paint job as well as paint quality control, but they are marketed as 1/64, but usually not. This one, for example, is way too big. This lighting is just gonna kill me, isn't it? The other Meichong Group member is Moraga, which originally started as an Italian company. They have very good details and they actually have interiors. The wheels don't look great usually, and they're really nicely detailed, but the problem is they're too big to look right alongside your Hot Wheels vehicles. Now, excuse me, Maisto and Moraga are important because the Meichong Group actually holds exclusive Ferrari license for diecast makers. Which is one of the reasons you might want to consider looking into them. But they also sub-license this license to the Japanese company Takara Tomy, which makes Tomica. And Tomica basic models are highly detailed. They usually have multiple pieces. This model, for instance, has plastic inserts for its tail lights as well as its headlights. And in my opinion, personally, I say it's the best toy model. They have suspension. They're not all 1/64, but all of their models have their exact scale on the bottom of the car, which is very much appreciated. For their basic line, the wheels are a bit bland, but I don't mind it too much because everything else is really, really nicely done, in my opinion. They do have some other lines. This one, for instance, is Tomica Premium, which I wouldn't really personally consider premium the way I see it, but it's really, really, really good. First thing you see is that they have a lot better details, and they also have better wheels. They have a lot larger variety of wheels they're able to use for these models. And Tomica Limited Vintage. These are basically the best, how would I say it? This is the highest quality of 1/64 models you can possibly find. Extremely detailed and very expensive. A regular size TLV model is sold in Japan for the equivalent of 23 American dollars. So if you're getting them in America, probably expect $25 to $30 for one of those regular size models. Next up is Majorette, which is a French company. They're somewhat similar to Tomica, and also similar to Tomica is that they're not very accessible in the United States. This is what it's called a Majorette Premium. They're very nicely detailed. They do have opening parts as well as suspension. Next up is a slightly smaller lesser known company. It's called Motormax. They're pretty well detailed for basic toy models, but the problem is they're way too big. So again, similar to Moraga, will not look right next to your Hot Wheels models. Now next up, this will be the start of my true 1/64 stuff, which I will start with Greenlight. So true 1/64, they're generally pretty cheap, which is surprising for how detailed they are. Roughly like $6 or $7. Highly detailed. Some of them have metal bases, some of them have plastic bases, and they have a huge selection of models. And for instance, this Matchbox for Falcon is just wonderful looking in my opinion. Next up is M2 Machines. It's another American company. Again, you can see it's highly detailed. Just look at the side mirrors. From what I have heard, they are pretty delicate, so don't play with it too much. Some of them I think also have plastic bases. This one has a metal base and usually come with a acrylic display case. Next up is Auto World, which is owned by Round 2. They do have a basic range, which is barely worth mentioning, so I'm just going to move swiftly on into their premium range, which pretty much only do American American vehicles, although I'm pretty sure there is actually a Toyota something coming out later this year. So they're highly detailed, although I've had problems with their paint chipping before even opening the packaging, and they do have metal bases. Also owned by Round 2 are Johnny Lightning, as well as Racing Champions Mint, which in my opinion are pretty much just they're pretty very similar in terms of their quality. Not true 164, which is genuinely a shame because these are some of the most incredibly detailed and nicely painted models I have ever seen, as well as in my personal collection. Really good. Really wish they could just be 164. And next up, it's Jade, which I think is also American. I don't have too many of those. These models are actually marketed as 164, but no, not even close. You can see this thing is huge. Like, this will not look right next to Moraga models because this is too big in my opinion. Let's see, what else? Well, and I have to say Jada is really nicely detailed and nicely painted, but, you know. Next up is Schuko, which is a German company. And these models are really nicely detailed. True 164, again, we're back to True 164. It has a metal base, great casting. Their paint is usually super on point unless you go for the ones that they have like really detailed large decals. For instance, this one that goes across multiple surfaces. For instance, you can see here the paint doesn't necessarily go across the whole thing. You can see there's a bit of a gap here. If you don't go for models with this kind of deco, I think you'll love the ones you get. Next up is Kyosho. Kyosho is another Japanese company, and they have larger models, but their 164 stuff are true 164. Incredibly detailed. It's got a plastic base, but it doesn't matter because it's so good looking. And they actually still make Ferrari, even though they didn't license it from either Tarmac, Takara or the Matchbox group, because for these models they actually just give you all of the parts and ask you to make them yourself, so it's technically a model kit, quote unquote. Next up, another Japanese brand is Oshima, or Ayoshima, or I'm not quite sure how to pronounce it. It's pretty much very similar to Kyosho in terms of quality, which means it's very good. The only problem is that they pretty much only do Bosozoku style Japanese cars in this scale. Again, true 164. Next up is a Hong Kong company. It's a Mini GT, which is a line from true scaled models, or TSM for short. They're true 164. They do pretty much supercars and race cars, that kind of stuff. It's a newcomer in this market. It's very detailed, but I definitely have run into some quality control problem with their products. Next up, another Hong Kong company. This is Tarmac Works. They have two lines. They have both lines are true 164. They have the super high premium of Hobby 64 of actual race cars with detailed liveries, but it's not really my thing. This one is from their lower premium, which is still really nicely detailed, what is called Global 64. They do have more normal decals as well as some even stock models. This is the only model I own, so I don't know how if this is universal or not, but I do have a little bit of problem with their quality control. But they also do have a true 164 Koenigsegg JR, and if you know how in demand the Hot Wheels version is, I think this is a very significant. Next up, what is it? Next up is Aerocar, again from Hong Kong. It's a true 164. It's got moving parts, very highly detailed. Although it's very delicate, I recommend not rolling them. They can be rolled, but you might just break a wheel while you try to do that. But you can see it's really nicely detailed. Whew. Next up, Sparky, which is a company based in Macau, Spark models, and they do pretty much true 164 real race cars. It's really nicely detailed. It's got a plastic chassis. It's really nicely detailed, but the paint is a bit delicate, so try to only touch the spots with no decals. And this is pretty much all of the mainstream brands, I would call, like the brands that are still accessible to an extent in the United States. Some of the other ones I would like to show. For instance, this one is Welly, which I think is a Chinese brand. They market it as 160, but possibly a bit larger. These are really nicely done, but it's hard to get them in the United States, and they're all right. Next up is Summer, which is a company based in Hong Kong, or at least used to base in Hong Kong. I'm pretty sure they don't exist anymore. Their more modern or even contemporary models are okay but bland. But these classic cars are really cool. For instance, this Ford Model T. They're not expensive either. You can easily find them on eBay. And next up is Grell, which is a German company. And these things are pretty much what I would consider to be premium. They do have a rubber tire, so they'll still plastic base. And what's really cool about them is that they do a ton of models from the old Eastern Bloc. You see a lot of like Trabants, a lot of like Volgas and Ladas. So there's not a lot of options if you're interested in these kind of vehicles. So it's a cool niche that it fills. And Garon, which I think is Chinese, but I'm not perfectly sure. You see they do make a lot of like New York NYPD or NYFD models that have actual licensed deco. This one is a Ford Crown Victoria. They got really nice paint, and I would say they got better quality control with their paint than Hot Wheels. It's not super desirable. It's cool to have, but the thing is they have very few options. They also have some unlicensed models as well. And remember at the beginning of the video when I said there's one company that doesn't really count, and this is a I don't even remember what it's called. Give me 1 second. It's made to something Inc. It doesn't really matter because this is, as far as I know, the only model they made. This is a Mad Max thing for the video game. It's a pre-order bonus you can get from GameStop. It's a cool thing, but it's really light. It feels like the metal is high quality. It's nicely detailed. There's no production problem with it, but if you're interested, why not? So this is pretty much the end of this video. I want to thank you for watching. I hope it's been helpful, and starting from the next video you will start to see the models in their own categories. I will obviously spend more time on each brand, going more in depth and compare them with one another, so you can know what brands you want to get and what brands fits your interest as well as your budget. So yeah, this is it. Thank you for watching, and hope you will return for the more detailed ones.